Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we're covering on this week's episode. Last week, we mentioned the Trump administration's cancellation of the recognition of World AIDS Day, but we didn't really dive into the implications of that. What effects did we actually see of that cancellation? LGBTQ issues and technology. What are some of the intersections between those two sectors that have us talking? Falling birth rates. How concerned should we be, and how queer of an issue is this? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, senior staff writer for the Buckeye Flame. Hey, I work there too. H.L. Comeriato. H, thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Ken Schneck, thank you for having me.
Managing editor for the Sero project and communications lead for the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, Juan Michael Porter II. Juan Michael, great to have you back.
And as always, happy to take someone else's speaking slot.
It is yours. It's got your name on it. And data and technology reporter for the 19th, she who checks all of our math, Jasmine Mithani. Jasmine, so great to have you back.
So excited to be here again. Thanks.
This is a dream team. We had this team together months ago, so we are now reassembled. This is our LGBTQ reporters roundtable for this week, so let's dive in. So as I mentioned in the intro, last week we talked about the Trump administration's decision to cancel the recognition of World AIDS Day, but we talked about it in the context of whether anything can even surprise LGBTQ journalists these days. We didn't really get into the actual implications of Trump canceling this recognition. So we got to start with you, Juan Michael. Does that cancellation, and I put it in air quotes, does that cancellation really make any difference?
It does. It affects policy. And it's important for people to understand that policy isn't what a government believes, it's what a government does. And this serves as a notification of intent. We've already seen the Trump administration put forth moves to slash HIV funding in half across the United States. It's already canceled HIV funding globally, the support from the United States, which has led up to this point over 630,000 deaths. It also lets us know what is going to happen in the next year when it comes time to renew things like Ryan White. And it wasn't just canceling the acknowledgement at the White House level. They also barred public servants or people who worked within the administration from speaking about or acknowledging World AIDS Day. And so that becomes a blanket effect of ignoring the fact that HIV is still an issue. And I want to take us back to the bad days of the AIDS crisis when the press secretary of Reagan, whenever he was asked about HIV, would joke about it and laugh and mock people or say, well, I'm not gay. It was essentially saying no homo about an issue that ended up killing hundreds of thousands of people. And so I think that the cancellation makes a difference because it's replatforming what brought us to the AIDS crisis in the first place.
And I think you pretty much did answer this next question with everything you just put out there. But how does canceling World AIDS Day fit into the initiative to end the epidemic by 2030? Which, by the way, I think some folks might forget that initiative did come under the first Trump administration, did it not?
It absolutely did. And him initiating that initiative, it was in the works for years. And it was considered an easy win of like, okay, both the Republicans and the Democrats agree that HIV is a bad thing. We have everything we need to contain HIV. I say contain instead of end because, well, with measles, we see that things can come back. This shows, again, the abandonment of that plan and of people who were historically affected by HIV. And that includes people who are experiencing poverty, people who are homeless, people who don't have access to medical care, Black people, trans people, women. Entire populations across the US who are vulnerable to HIV have been abandoned by their government. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it does not have to be this way. That if anything, it's within the power of this administration to take what is a chronic but lifelong illness and contain it so that no one else has to ever be diagnosed. And they've decided, well, we don't care.
Yeah. H, this made me think of your coverage during this past summer of the cuts to HIV services here in Ohio. There really is a trickle-down effect with what happens at that federal level and then what you see on the state level as we saw here in Ohio, no?
Oh, absolutely. Because the federal government does take care of so much funding in terms of HIV/AIDS research, prevention. We've been seeing this stack up over time. So I've been covering this since at least March. Post-Trump inauguration, a lot of LGBTQ leaders gathered here in Cleveland to talk about these massive impending cuts. And Gil Kudrin was one of them. Gil Kudrin has reconvened Cleveland's ACT UP chapter. So ACT UP is an acronym, stands for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And Gil reconvened this for the first time in 20 years because he saw these cuts coming and he was warning people. And just a few weeks after that first meeting, that was when a preliminary budget for the 2026 fiscal year was leaked. And it outlined more than $40 billion in cuts to the Department of Health and Human Services, which would primarily gut federal AIDS programs, like Juan Michael was saying. And 1.2 million Americans are currently living with the virus. About half of them receive care under programs that are federally funded. So in Ohio, Equitas Health is our state's largest recipient of federal HIV/AIDS funding, and they run the OHIV program. So this is services, resources for people living with the virus. They're really easy to access. They're always free. And part of what OHIV does is run an HIV hotline. And in June, they had to shut down their hotline because they were waiting on grant money that they typically receive every year from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. And when they didn't get that money from the CDC, they could no longer run these programs. So OHIV had services, not just the hotline, but free condom services and free testing services interrupted between June 25th and July 7th. So for us, that may not seem like a huge amount of time, right? But people living with the virus cannot go without their medications. They cannot go without healthcare. So when these services were interrupted, people were immediately in danger. It is not safe for people to go without the medications that keep them alive. So we're seeing really this trickle-down effect is very, very serious and affecting things like, can I make a phone call and ask a question about my status or how to get tested? Can I ask a simple question on the phone?
Even one person. The idea that during that, let's say, 2-week span, that one person tried to call a hotline and no one picked up or the call went dead or it didn't work, that even happened to one person is just...
It's devastating.
Beyond conception. But this is not the only Trump administration cut that is affecting our community. Jasmine, you wrote recently about cuts to domestic violence prevention programs. How bad is it looking in that sphere?
So we're in a waiting period right now as more congressional funding bills will be passed in the new year. But the House Appropriations Bill and the president's recommendations proposed massive cuts of millions and millions of dollars to these fundamental programs. A lot of the domestic violence shelters, hotlines, direct services that help people with legal aid. A lot of those are nonprofits and they're funded through the federal government through primarily the Violence Against Women Act, a lot of other things through the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, and HUD. And, this is really important because, queer people, queer women are more likely than straight women to experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Same with bisexual men. And, more than half of all trans and non-binary people have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. So this is absolutely essential to our community. And right now, so while those cuts are pending, the biggest threats have been from increased restrictions on what future funds and funds that have already been allocated could be used for. And so a lot of those applications from those agencies I mentioned, they say that the funds can't be used to prevent like gender ideology, big air quotes, or, I will say in the words of the administration, illegal aliens. And that makes DV services organizations worry that they can't help queer or immigrant survivors, regardless of their legal status, without losing their funding. And that funding is essential because there is very, very little private funding. Only some states give money to these organizations. And, I will say right now there have been like temporary blocks to some of those requirements, but we don't know how that's going to shake out as they kind of ascend through the court structure. And, I read about like one shelter that like took down the pride flag on their website. Some places were taking out pronouns in their bios. They say, of course, they'll continue to serve everyone, but those aren't just performative. They're really important measures to show we care about the queer community. We're aware of this. You're not going to contact our hotline and then be told that what's happening to you isn't real because it's not, a man abusing a woman. We know that there's many different forms of intimate partner violence. So again, we are sort of waiting to see what's going to happen, but I think a lot of these organizations are bracing for really big cuts. But I think also they're fighting.
More to come on that for sure. Well, let's talk about technology because several stories this week centered on this intersection of LGBTQ plus identity and technology. Jasmine, let's keep going with you. Some brand new reporting from you on how age verification laws are affecting trans communities. I learned so much reading about this. Break this one down for us.
All right. So at this point, half of US states are requiring porn websites to confirm that users over 18 are over 18 before they allow access. And a lot of the ways that they confirm the age of users is more difficult for trans people because some of the most common ways are, and these are things that are written into these laws, is like uploading a passport, checking government ID, submitting a face scan to like guess how old you are or guess that you're over 18 or under 18, and or linking to banking information. So this story came from Tech Policy Press, where I'm a fellow, and my fellow, Dia Kayali, and I worked on this together. I spoke about what are some of the problems with these methods, actually. And, there's a researcher I spoke with, awesome person, Os Keys, and they pointed out to me that there are a lot of potential issues with face scanning. It's HRT can make, trans femme people look younger. And often as well, it makes trans masc people look younger too. And then that can mess with that sort of like facial identification, age estimation. Also in the past, research has shown that image recognition systems often misclassify trans people. And a lot of these age verification technologies build on those flawed foundations. A lot of companies aren't making their own. They're contracting this out to like a third party. And of course, all of those are proprietary algorithms. It's a black box that we don't really know how it works. But we also know that trans people don't often have up-to-date IDs, especially because of executive orders this year that make it more difficult to get documents that align with your gender identity. And what was really great about working on this piece with Dia is that this is like a global problem as well. Age verification is rolled out for more than sexually explicit material in like the UK and other countries. With the Online Safety Act, age verification provision going into effect, I believe in July, like the menstruation subreddit was blocked initially because we all know that people get their periods on their 18th birthday.
Right.
And, Dia and I also pointed out that a lot of these state houses that are rolling out age verification laws, 25 states in the US have them in effect right now. They're at the forefront of anti-LGBTQ legislation. And a lot of them try to legally define, homosexually or just the existence of trans people or drag queens as fundamentally pornographic. So that's why when they're blocking porn, there's a lot of worry that they're actually just going to block queer content.
Wow, there was so much in that reporting. I'm excited for folks to read it that will make you stop and say, oh, gosh, I didn't think of that. And I know this wasn't the point of anything that you just said, but I am now announcing a fellowship program just so I can have a fellow. That's the only thing that I'm going for right now. So thank you for that. Juan Michael, there was some chatter online about advocates from the Save HIV Funding campaign ringing the bell at NASDAQ last week. What is the tension there? I was fascinated by this.
So, Ken, you're from the New York area, and you know that ringing the bell at NASDAQ is the lamest thing ever, that no one brags about it. If you're like, I'm ringing the bell at NASDAQ, the appropriate response is, oh, I'm sorry, or like, ugh. And so you had this incredible coalition of many HIV activists and policymakers, many of whom are friends and peers, who act like ringing this bell and delivering their speech there has moved the needle in some way. And some people are like, well, we got to talk to people wherever they are at all places. And I remind them of Audre Lorde's quote that master's tools will never undo master's house. And as one colleague put it, Ebony Turk, she's at Chicago House, a brilliant co-executive director of Positive Women's Network USA. She's like, is this really where we should be putting our energy and our efforts? Isn't there somewhere else where we could be in alignment with people? For instance, the White House and HUD are passing a new NOFO, or Notification of Funding Opportunities, which will make it impossible for people who are providing services to people who are unhoused to keep them in their homes. People are going to be homeless come February. And instead of focusing on that and the fact that homelessness is one of the largest drivers of HIV, they're ringing the bell at NASDAQ. Or instead of talking to college students and saying, hey, your sexual health care is being taken away from you, and that is wrapped up with sexual health protection and other public health information, and we need to make sure that you have the tools that are necessary to protect yourself, they're ringing the bell at NASDAQ. We've lost the plot at this point. And as I said to one peer who insisted that we should talk to everyone, we do talk to everyone at NASDAQ. They're the pharma executives who use our blood and our bones and don't actually care about us. We're profit to them. We're a cash crop, literally. And instead of saying like, okay, how can we make this a possibility of enriching people who are living with HIV. I don't know, maybe increasing services around financial literacy. They're just giving the same dinky speech that they always give instead of thinking, okay, well, what do we think about this that you will care about? Do you see how there's not real communication? It's more of a failed press op.
Yeah, I'm still on the part where someone says, I get to ring the bell at NASDAQ and we say, I'm sorry. I'm putting that in the category of, there's a very special New York category of things like that. When one of your friends says, I'm an understudy in Chicago and I'm going on tonight, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's a thing. It's a thing that comes up.
That was so shady. Oh my God, I love it.
Sorry, it's a New York thing. H, I had to come up with an LGBTQ plus technology story for you for this part of the show. And so I found a groundbreaking article covering the first Selkie platoon. Tell us about that article.
Yeah. So my coworker, Ben Jodway, wrote this, my lovely colleague, and he wrote it for Aftermath, which is like an online gaming culture publication. And if you're not familiar, Arma 3 is a military simulation, right? It's often shortened to like MilSim. And you'll see that word like as one word appear pretty often. And if you're not familiar, think super realistic military strategy warfare. Obviously, this is a space that has been dominated by straight, cis, white guys primarily for years and years and years. But my awesome colleague dug a little deeper. He finds the first Selkie platoon, which was founded by a trans woman, and it is pretty much trans girls only. He was sort of an exception to get in here and write this story. And it is amazing to see the way that these trans girls have flipped this narrative and built like a real community around this military simulation game that people don't think that they should be playing and they're so often mistreated while they're playing. It's not a very welcoming environment. And this is something different. They all play together, and it's provided them not only with a lot of support and companionship, like as trans people, but a lot of joy in being able to do a thing that they really love authentically. Otherwise, they're pretty much not speaking into the microphone so that they can hide their voices. They're trying to be as anonymous as possible in order to participate. And that doesn't feel good as a trans person. And this is a different way to do that and a different way to build community in a space that most people would say is unlikely. So read that story. It's very cool, even if you're not a gamer.
Shout out to Ben Jodway of the Buckeye Flame who wrote that piece. All right, here's the question that we have arrived at. Why are so many Americans worried about falling birth rates? It's a question that Jasmine and her colleagues at the 19th have asked and are now looking into the data. And Jasmine promised us more information on this, so we get Jasmine back on the show to actually provide that information. We talked about this, Jasmine, back in late October. What are the latest concerns about these falling birth rates? You all did this incredible survey. You got all of this data. What are you seeing in the trends in interpreting the data?
There's like a long history of it being tied to eugenics, Nazism, and like anti-immigrant sentiment. It's also really closely tied to white supremacy and traditional gender roles. For instance, like the Ku Klux Klan emphasized that like white women were essential to their movement in order to create more white babies. Like they needed wombs in order for their movement to survive. Making it easier for people to have children isn't a bad thing, of course. A lot of experts did tell us, though, that policies aimed to do that usually aren't applied equally. Like on the campaign trail, Trump promised insurance or the government would cover in vitro fertilization because that can cost like tens of thousands of dollars. But at the same time, it's really unlikely that any federal policy like that would apply to LGBTQ plus people who are the largest users of assisted reproductive technologies, right? And we see this too with potential changes towards like adoption criteria and things like that.
Yeah. And lest we need further confirmation that this is indeed a queer issue, there's a bill here in Ohio, that Republican sponsors say is actually designed to address falling birth rates. Tell us about this very serious bill that we will take very seriously here on This News is So Gay.
Yeah. So Republicans have introduced Ohio House Bill 262. They did this a few months ago. And the bill would create a thing called, quote, Natural Family Month. And this bill was proposed by Rep. Beth Lear and Rep. Josh Williams. And Josh Williams has some pretty close ties to the Center for Christian Virtue, which is a designated anti-LGBTQ hate group. The Southern Poverty Law Center has categorized them that way. So already we've got some red flags. But if you're not familiar with this language, it may seem kind of innocuous at first. But what we're really doing with this bill is defining what a natural family is. And that definition excludes LGBTQ people completely. In this bill, a natural family is defined as, quote, a man and a woman united in marriage, raising their biological and or adopted children. So we're already working with a really strange definition of natural here. We're working adoption in. Typically, natural would refer to a natural birth. Adoptions, there may not be a natural birth. It's very, very confusing, this language. It implies by omission that families with LGBTQ parents, transgender parents, or even families that are just structurally different, right? You have a grandparent, some cousins, maybe you're raised by your aunt or uncle. Somehow, this bill construes those types of families as being unnatural. And once we've categorized something as unnatural, it can get a little dangerous legally. So Republicans have repeatedly introduced legislation that frames LGBTQ families as a threat in this way, as a social and cultural threat. Absolutely. That's what we're looking at in these bills.
I have watched every single one of those hearings. So again, Natural Family Month, what is it? It's the month between Mother's Day and Father's Day, right? And their justification truly is about falling birth rates, that recognizing natural families will stimulate Ohioans to have more children, which is just fascinating.
The idea is that being honored in this way will make people want to have children and raise them.
And by the way, don't sleep on Representative Beth Lear, who last year during a hearing just flat out said that parents who support their trans children should have a millstone tied around their neck and drowned. So she has her views. Yeah.
Oh.
Jasmine?
Yeah, I also want to say, because like I said, there isn't really a reason for falling birth rates that's like directly applicable. And so there's also not like an easy solution, right? Like a lot of people that we talk to mentioned like Scandinavian countries, which are like kind of seen as this like oasis of childcare. But they have really low birth rates too. And so I think a lot of people throw a lot of wild things at this problem and they don't necessarily work. And also, Natural Family Month is giving me flashbacks to Catholic school, where we learned about natural family planning as the best form of birth
Oh,
control.
yeah.
Me too. Were we in the same class? Maybe.
I'm a gay Jew, and I was in that class as well. So I feel that very,
Also,
very deeply.
Plot twist, I was gay the whole time. So
The most effective form of birth control.
That's what we're promoting. I don't know what sponsorship that's going to get us, Jasmine, but I'm excited to find out. Well, I could not for the life of me find a solid transition from falling birth rates to Juan Michael Porter II. I did, however, stumble onto a different piece about West Side Story and Papa Alex. And so I encourage everyone to read that one. I was doing this Juan Michael Porter II deep dive. I was trying to find something. But I did find a piece that you commissioned and edited about Black maternal health and HIV and AIDS, and that felt pretty on brand for this conversation. Tell us about that piece.
Well, first, I have to acknowledge my Papa Alex, who died over 13 years ago and was the only person I've ever known who said that there was nothing I could do to make him stop loving me. And this was my father figure after I left my family when I was a teenager. And everything that I am today, if there's anything good of it, it comes from having mentors and family members like that, found family members who choose you like that in your life. But to this piece by Dr. Stella Sappho and Dr. Rebecca Daly, it looks at quality of life issues that affect Black mothers specifically, which has been in the news lately. I think we all saw that horrible video clip of a Black woman who was being ignored while she was screaming in what was clear, like excruciating pain. And she was just being ignored by this white hospital attendee. And that, unfortunately, is much more common than one would expect. This comes from the medical misinformation, the idea that Black people have thicker skin and therefore don't feel pain as much, the lie that we don't need as much pain medication because we've been bred to work through things. I've heard doctors actually say this before, and it's shocking. And so while I was listening to Jasmine speak, I was thinking, this sounds like a quality of life issue, which very much so affects Black mothers. And within this piece, what Dr. Sappho and Dr. Daly were arguing is that there are a number of advocacy lessons to be learned from the HIV movement that can help to revolutionize care. And I think that's entirely true. It goes a little bit like this. Hold people accountable, hold people hostage for the horrible decisions that they make. Pin it to them and force it on them until they change, but also stop giving them our business. Go elsewhere. Live with people who actually see you as people and who will respect you in the choices that you make. And I think that's especially important to hear in this current era as we're calling the year to a close as LGBTQ people, that we don't have to participate in our own demise. We can actually make better choices that empower us and that lift us up so that we are not dying when we go and seek healthcare. And I think that this is another big issue to call up outside of the public health perspective. LGBTQ people are much more likely to face prosecution than our heterosexual counterparts. And in many instances, it is just because we are different. We face discrimination, we face fewer opportunities, we face all kinds of overwhelming, all but guaranteeing negative outcome behavior. But we don't have to cede the space or empower people to continue harming us. And so I really hope that you who are listening to this take what Ken and Jasmine and HL have put forward and use it to build your own salvation, but also to stop patronizing people who are actively trying to destroy you.
I would love if this podcast has that effect, because you all are listening to This News is So Gay, and I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame. Joining me this week, HL Comeriato, also from the Buckeye Flame, Juan Michael Porter II from the Sero Project, and Jasmine Mithani from the 19th. Well, it is indeed that time of the show, folks. It is time for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing out there covered in the news. So let's set off a glitter bomb. What stories are you all seeing out there of queer joy that people should know about? Jasmine Mithani, let's start with you. What queer joy are you seeing out there in the world?
This is very personal, but I was never part of the fandom of Dan and Phil, these YouTube creators, who finally told their audience after 16 years that they've actually been dating the whole time after not confirming a relationship and taking 10 years for them to separately come out as gay. So I've been watching a lot of clip compilations of them, and I also saw that how important their presence in the media ecosystem. They're in the UK, but how I saw how important that was to young kids across the pond. They've both been ranked as like being really positive influences, and I was never like a big YouTube kid. So I think that's just like really wonderful that there are some like really nice role models out in the world playing video games and streaming them.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Juan Michael Porter II, where are you seeing queer joy?
So for me, queer joy comes again out of World AIDS Day. Last week on World AIDS Day, you had Housing Works, NMAC, AIDS United, and Health Gap protesting in front of the White House. And they had like these long streaming banners that save HIV funding, that PEPFAR saves lives, and that they just were not allowing us to be ignored or erased. And this is led by longtime HIV activists who have been doing this work and living with this virus for over 40 years. And I think it's so incredible that many of them are gay men, but then trans people, and then people from across the gender spectrum who are coming together and saying, you can try to put a wet blanket over our faces and we're still going to punch through and make you listen to us on the very steps of this awful White House.
Love it. Love it. H.L. Comeriato, queer joy, where are you seeing it?
I am going to talk about my own story.
Please.
Thank you. It's called, I'm not going to read you the headline. It is about Gay Fad Studios. Gay Fad Studios is a historic glass production company in Lancaster, Ohio, and it was founded by Fran Taylor, who is a Detroit native. She grew up there during the Great Depression. She founded this business by investing in some tin waste paper baskets. She hand-painted them, sold them for a profit, and 5 years later, her company was worth millions of dollars. She moved it to Lancaster, Ohio, and she made glass there for almost 2 decades. In the late 1960s, something terrible happened, and she had to close the doors of her glass production company. And it sort of seemed like they would never reopen until this gay couple, Jason and David Annecy, they move there on a whim almost. They discover this history, and they sink a ton of time and money and passion into reopening Gay Fad Studios. So now they use her designs and new ones that they designed themselves, and they have a brick and mortar studio in downtown Lancaster that you can go see with a little museum dedicated to Fran Taylor, who was a trailblazer in her time. So this is really cool. If you're ever in that area, you certainly need to stop by Gay Fad Studios.
I think it was her birthday the other day. I saw that online that they posted that.
Yeah, she is quite the character. She was running this business at a time when women were not doing this, and she had a team of 25 women, like hand painting these glasses. Her artistic designer was a woman named Bill, which is awesome.
People have to check out, by the way, this glass, because it's also just so me, like the style of it. And you even said that. You were like, wait, you would own these. I don't.
Ken Schneck should have a set for a bar cart, for sure. They're stunning. These mid-century designs, they're beautiful, and there's something behind them. It's about championing women who do this and who create things.
There it is. And finally, congratulations to Rose Tegnesi. The San Diego teacher was awarded $700,000 to be paid out over the next 20 years by the Grossmont Union High School District. They demoted her, and in some of their actions, they said that she was and I quote, a lesbian witch. Now, I know that we covered Wicked on last week's episode, so this is not necessarily a Wicked-related question, but I still need to ask the roundtable this week's quick queer culture question. Which witch do you most closely identify with? Jasmine Mithani, which witch?
The actress Michelle Yeoh, because I too have heard a great joke once and then had to tell everyone, Madame Morrible, flip it around, Wicked Witch, and also I can't sing. Sorry.
We're all going to get in trouble this week. We got the Wicked crowd. We got the Chicago crowd. Let's see who else we can alienate. H.L. Comeriato, which witch?
Unfortunately, I will not be alienating anyone with this because I am taking you back to 1999 to Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost. My witch, the Hex Girls.
There it is.
And if you don't know them, they are Dusk, Thorn, and Luna. Thorn is by far the coolest.
Noted. Juan Michael Porter II, which witch?
So this is a bit niche. There's this video game TV show cartoon called Ruby, W-R-B-Y, and one of the characters is Glinda Goodwitch. And she is a telekinetic baddie, blonde, white queen serving, leather chops wearing, will whoop your ass mama. And I'm here for her.
I love it. I do want to remind our listening audience the correct answer was indeed Fairuza Balk. We want to hear what you all are working on. Juan Michael Porter II, what is coming up for you?
I'm writing about the NOFO issue from HUD and their attempt to take away funding for people who need housing support. I'm also writing about... So we know that the Trump administration has said that they can deny people visas if they're obese, have diabetes, or are living with cancer. And I pointed out that that means that they could reignite the HIV travel ban. Notification has come down that they're drafting a proposal to start banning people, denying visas based upon HIV status. And so in another world where we've already fought these battles and are having to fight them again, I'm trying to reignite the flame to warn people that it's happening.
Okay, careful with the phrase reignite the flame. That's all we have copyrighted over here. I'm just saying. H.L. Comeriato, what do you got coming up?
Well, I'm going to be providing a little update on the City Club of Cleveland. They, unfortunately, have booked Aaron Baer, who is the president of the Center for Christian Virtue, CCV, and they are a designated anti-LGBTQ hate group. So we'll be giving a little update on that, what they say, what LGBTQ activists in the region are saying, and how that's going to play out when it does indeed happen. I've also got a bunch of other stuff coming up, including a bigger story on libraries, book bans, and why librarians are kind of killing it.
Yeah, they are our heroes. Jasmine Mithani, what's coming up for you at the 19th?
So I'm taking a little break from tech to cover my hometown of Los Angeles, building off of some reporting I did this year, interviewing feminist, anti-authoritarian Filipino-American organizers. I'm really excited about that. And real talk, I'm also going to be spending time promoting the 19th year-end impact drive, which is our biggest campaign of the year and lets us continue to do essential journalism centering women and queer people. We have a donor match, and you can contribute if you visit 19thnews.org and click on the donate button. Gay dollars, heterosexual dollars, pansexual dollars. We want them all.
Amazing. It is that time of the year. Everyone must be supporting these independent news outlets. Well, that is all the time that we have for this week. I want to thank our roundtable, H.L. Comeriato. Let's ride back to the newsroom together.
Oh my gosh, fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Juan Michael Porter II, always a treat to have you on.
Always happy to be here.
And Jasmine Mithani, please keep doing what you're doing at the 19th.
Yes, love to rep the West Coast.
I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, and if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming like this. And it's Newsmatch. That's the time of the year where everything that you donate gets doubled. And that makes such a colossal difference for a scrappy queer newsroom like ours. In the meantime, please read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories from LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.